Minister, thank you so much for joining us here today. And joining the Minister is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Robert Iano, and the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Lawrence Hansen. Thank you both for joining us here today. Thank you, Deputy Minister, for joining us. Minister, you'll have up to 5 minutes, and then the routine. We'll move to the Conservatives for 6 minutes and the other parties as well. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. It's a real pleasure to be here. I spent a little bit of time on this committee as a member, and I know the great work that they do. Hello, everyone. Bonjour. C'est un plaisir d'être.
Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure for me to be back. As a former member of this committee, I know how important your work is to the agriculture sector.
I serve as the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. And I'm proud to work with you to move the sector forward. I'll just take a couple of minutes before our discussion to speak about my mandate as a minister and how that's played out over the last 5.5, 6 months. Right out of the gate, I made every effort to get boots on the ground, especially given the huge uncertainty and instability of our farmers we're facing at this time. Over the summer, I was able to visit farms in all 3 prairie provinces. Saskatchewan, we had a great stop at Rob Stone's farm, who many of us know, including a couple rounds of it in his new sprayer without doing any damage. I was also able to take in the Stampede named at the Agribition in November. I visited producers and agribusinesses in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. A highlight was the Strang family farm, who expanded their potato operation to include an on-farm distillery for smaller potatoes that would normally go to waste. One very positive sign of that was our unanimous agreement to make ag stability more bankable for producers by increasing the compensation rate from 80 to 90%, doubling the payment cap from $3 million to $6 million. I also made sure to sit down with canola producers across the prairies as we work to restore our trade with China. And in mid-September, I joined the Prime Minister for a meeting with our canola industries right here in Ottawa. The Prime Minister followed up with some targeted measures for the canola sector, for a start, to ensure that the signal was sent that we're there for them. So based on what I'm hearing on the ground, I see my mandate as 3 key deliverables for producers and the sector. Expand and build our trade to key markets, unleash greater potential by cutting red tape, and invest in tech and innovation. On trade, we are doubling down to help producers diversify their markets around the world. In August, I led a trade mission with the industry to the Indo-Pacific, and I can tell you, our customers there want more of our high-quality food. Last week, I was in Mexico with industry to grow our trade there. Secretary Berdarge and I definitely were on the same page when it comes to the need to strengthen our integrated North American value chains. On red tape reduction, I thank the committee for looking at this issue, which is front and center for the sector and our government and has been front and center for me for some time. Canada's regulatory system is based in science, considered among the most robust in the world, but it can also be challenging for producers and agribusinesses to navigate. We need an even playing field with the countries that we trade with, and we need to expedite those regulatory decisions to keep our industry competitive. CFIA has recently taken a number of positive steps in that direction. And finally, we know that innovation is key to a competitive sector. Alongside our innovation programs, I am also committed to looking at new avenues for investment in partnership with the industry. I've had some great meetings with investors who see huge potential in our sector of agri-food and agriculture. And to help jumpstart that investment in ag tech, Farm Canada recently launched a $2 billion capital investment fund. In short, Mr. Chair, whenever we make a decision, we want to make the same approach as our farmers do, through an economic lens. After all, we're talking about an industry that contributes $150 billion to our GDP, $100 billion to our exports, and 1 in 9 jobs in Canada. The Prime Minister often says he wants to make Canada the strongest economy in the G7. He can't do it without agriculture. So I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, and the committee members for having me here today. I look forward to the discussion and the questions. And I wanted to add, I'm here to learn as much as possible from you. There's some farmers sitting around this table, and I appreciate their inputs as well. Thank you.
Minister, and I'll go to the Conservatives for 6 minutes. Mr. Barlow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. You talked about economy, which I think is critical. And the Prime Minister stated that he wants an economic lens put on everything, and it was in the Liberal election platform and in your mandate to make changes to CFIA and PMRA to ensure that they looked at food security and economic impact. But Mr. Iannarro, the man beside you, when he was at committee and I asked him that question, said there's no need to change the mandate of CFIA. Are you going to follow through with your commitment and ensure that CFIA takes food security and economic impact into account when they make decisions?
Certainly, and as this discussion goes on, I will certainly challenge the CFIA and PMRA, and I think they know that very well. But I've seen some positive gestures from CFIA, and when we had a meeting in Winnipeg with the ministers from across the country, we had a presentation, and PMRA was there as well. It was really the first time at a ministers' meeting that we actually had them attend, and we were somewhat impressed. We had a long way to go, but we were impressed with some of the changes that they've made already.
Thank you, Minister. You asked, when will those changes be implemented then? On what date will CFIA ensure that they take economic impact and food security in their decision making?
There has been some changes already, and I could turn to my colleague to my right, but there has been 7 or 8 changes that are listed already, and there's 14 in the queue. Is that correct?
Well, with those mandate, the decision the CFIA put out, there's no metrics on when those changes need to come into effect. So, next questions, Mr. Minister. You talked about the importance of the canola industry. Have you spoken to your Chinese counterpart about the 75% tariffs on canola seed?
No, not directly to the agriculture minister.
Have you spoken to your Chinese counterpart about the 100% tariffs on canola oil?
No, not directly.
Have you spoken to your Chinese counterpart on the 100% tariffs on Canadian peas?
No, not directly.
Have you spoken to your counterpart on 25% tariffs on Canadian pork and seafood?
No, not directly.
Have you spoken to your Chinese counterpart on the inability for Canadian ranchers to export beef to China?
No, not directly.
If this is such a priority for the Prime Minister and as yourself, Minister, why have you not, or what date are you going to meet with your Chinese counterpart?
We will meet when the time is right. There's a plan in place right now. There's a strategy that goes along with visiting China. Minister Anand was there last week and made some really good headways. So we'll be following up with her relevant to a meeting with our Chinese counterparts. It's very an intricate situation that we are dealing with China. We don't want to, we want to ensure that whatever we do and whatever we say is not going to hurt any of those industries that you mentioned.
Thanks, Minister. If this was a priority, I think a priority would be meeting with your Chinese counterpart and sending that message to the producers. But speaking of your own province and your own constituents, it's been almost 5 years, in fact, more than 1,400 days since the Liberals self-imposed ministerial order on the ban of PEI seed potatoes. Do you believe that PEI is infested with potato wart, which is what the Liberal government's statement was?
Absolutely not. And I want to assure the member that, when we're talking about a geopolitical situation of trade that we have around the world right now, it might not be the most appropriate time to be pinpointing and measuring the aspects of all our trade to give someone else an opportunity to poke us in the eye, if I might say, from another country. So
your decision then is PEI is not infested with potato wart, so that's contrary to what your government has said previously. But you are not going to lift the ministerial order. You are going to sacrifice PEI potato farmers for geopolitical reasons. That's what I understand your answer to be. Is that correct?
No, that's incorrect. What I'm saying is to discuss this issue with our counterparts south of the border at this time would likely put an emphasis on potatoes as a whole, perhaps from every province in this country. I do not want to jeopardize any aspect of that whatsoever. The time will be right to discuss this with our counterparts across the or south of the border.
In the meantime, the PEI Potato Board has sent you a letter several weeks ago asking for compensation for every year that they have not been able to export seed potatoes. I believe that ask was $30 million. They have not yet received an answer from your office. Do you support compensating the PEI potato farmers for their lost export market?
I believe, if my figures are correct, there's been over $50 million transferred to the province of Prince Edward Island relevant to seed potatoes.
That was to destroy potatoes.
That's not all destroyed potatoes. We'll work with the PEI farmers and their potatoes. Last week we had a great conversation with PEI Potato Board. relevant to our trip to Mexico and how we may be able to access the Mexican market with PEI potatoes, along with Albertan potatoes.
Well, thanks, Minister. Alberta does grow more potatoes than PEI, but that's okay. The Sustainable Ag Strategy, you had a number of stakeholder groups leave that initiative because they felt that they were not being listened to, and the ideas of the agricultural strategy did not align with the needs of producers. Is your government going to move ahead with the 30% reduction in fertilizer use and 50% reduction in pesticide use, yes or no? And what will be the impact on loss of yields if those initiatives are followed through upon?
Yeah. So based on the fertilizer, I think there was a lot of misinformation when that was set out, but it's a voluntary program, obviously. So I think that likely answers the question.
Pesticides?
Same thing.
Thank you.
No.
6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
No.
6 minutes, please.
Mr. Perron?
Mr. Perron, you have 6 minutes. Oh.
You guys, no time for you.
I was trying to be nice. We'll go to Mr. Connors. Yeah, sorry, Mr. Perron. I apologize. Paul, 6 minutes.
Thank
There's
you.
something wrong with my
Something wrong
my microphone
with your
and my thing,
microphone?
so I was focusing on that. I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah.
Minister, input from the minister, and have an opportunity to discuss your mandate and some of the important work that's happening in the industry. Minister, this year, as you know, as a fellow Atlantic Canadian, was the worst year in recent memory for trout in Newfoundland and Labrador, and indeed Atlantic Canada, and probably other parts of the country as well. Some experts have called it a 1 in 50-year event, which resulted in a shortage of forage for the dairy, beef, and other sectors. Can you share with us some of the steps the government is taking to help producers in Newfoundland and Labrador and the Atlantic region?
Certainly. I mean, we have the BRM programs that they have access to, and although Newfoundland was not a signature on those programs, we're working closely with the Newfoundland. We were working closely with the Newfoundland government at the time, and then when they went into an election mode, which went into caretaker mode, and so we've reached out to them, and then they've reached out to us, and right now we haven't heard back from the new government.
Thank you very much. I will endeavour to reach out to the new government to get them to reach out to you. Also, coming from PEI, I know that you have first-hand knowledge of the importance of the Temporary Foreign Workers Program and playing the agricultural and the seafood and many other sectors, food processing sectors. We heard from the leader of the opposition and members of the Conservative caucus about cutting that program, which means clear that they don't appreciate how vital it would be to sectors not only in our region but throughout across the country. Can you speak to the importance of the Temporary Foreign Workers Program in this sector, in the fishery and processing, and tell the committee what you heard from your sector in conversations?
Well, I think it's extremely important. It's a 50-year-old program. I think, I even had this discussion with the Secretary of Mexico last week on the temporary. He was concerned about the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. So it's not just about our country, it's about their country as well. And we need to recognize that when we're dealing and trying to access more trade and more export into those countries. Look, it's not just farming, it's food processing, it's the fisheries. It's an extremely, extremely important tool for rural Canada, right across the country. It doesn't matter where you are or where you're from. And I think deep down, using it as a political weapon is not the right time. It's not the right tool to use as a political weapon because there's not a community in this country that doesn't have foreign workers in it likely that are being utilized because they have to be utilized. So I think it's an extremely important program. Does there need to be changes to it? Maybe there does. I don't know, but that's not my bailiwick. But I can tell you that without it, we wouldn't export over 100 billion products out of this country. Point blank.
And I would agree with you on that, because in my riding, temporary foreign workers are in the agriculture, in seafood and processing plants, and are a very important part of our supply, labor supply, to keeping those industries operating. Minister, you'll soon be in negotiations with our province and territories, our territorial counterparts in the next agricultural policy framework. Can you tell us what your priorities going into the negotiations and how you what your intent to be best protect farmers?
Well, I think that's a good question. But look, I'm the Minister of Agriculture, and I think the consultation process has to take place. And I think it's more important to hear from the agriculture sectors and the farmers themselves to ensure that we're doing everything possible within that policy framework that's going to help them. If it's a change to the BMR program, then we need maybe to look at it. If it's a change to another program, then maybe we need to look at it. My job is basically to facilitate and advocate on behalf of the farmers, and then make those decisions in just of the economic value, but also sustainability and making sure that the farmers are prosperous going forward for generations to come.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that every province is not the same when negotiations, and I know these partnerships are negotiated province by province, but not every province are the same. Newfoundland and Labrador's, what is needed to move our agriculture forward is not the same as probably in other provinces. How much time we got?
About 40 seconds left.
40 seconds. Now I got to come up with a new question.
You don't have to take all your time if you don't
Okay.
want to. Yeah,
No, we can.
if you're good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, Mr. Perron, your turn, please. Yes, 100%. Thank you so much.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Minister. I'm just going to wait a moment for you to put on your earpiece. Anything?
Monsieur le ministre.
Mr. Minister, do you hear interpretation? All right, so let's start our time. Mr. Minister, hello, and thank you for being here today. We appreciate that you made an effort to speak French at the very beginning of your opening remarks. Wasn't perfect, but you'll get there. I'll be quick, and I'd like some brief answers. 2 years ago, the Union of Farmers in Lanaudière asked the government to invest more in supporting agriculture. Most countries put 2% of their budget into agriculture. Canada allocates less than 1% of its budget to agriculture. Will you have any good news for us on November 4th? Have you had any good discussions with your colleagues over at Finance to tell them how important our agri-food and agriculture industries are?
Yes, I think when I get up to speak, and I know some of you have heard me, that when I start talking about how important agriculture is with a 7% GDP in this country, and the Prime Minister wanting to advance our economic standing within the G7, we can't do it without agriculture. So I don't think it's lost on anybody at this point. It is going to be a fiscally responsible budget. That's what we were elected on, and that's what people want us to do. But I can tell you that our voice is loud and clear at the table relevant to agriculture.
OK, donc là, on s'attend à voir le 4.
So on November 4th, we are expecting many cuts across many industries, but there won't be any in agriculture. Is that correct?
No, I'm not going to say that. I think we need to understand that there's been a lot of duplication in agriculture over the years. I started to see that when I first took over. And I think we need to streamline agriculture as best we can without losing any of the priorities for our farmers and our ranchers.
Rationaliser l'administration gouvernementale.
I understand what you're saying, but we should not be cutting into any agriculture programs. I want you to know that we need to be adapting to climate change. We have small farms, for example, who need support, financial support. Perhaps you have something important to tell them today, but we have to support the agriculture industry appropriately. anything for these small enterprises to adapt to climate change and to new practices?
Well, I think climate change is extremely important. We just heard from Newfoundland about basically what they're going through as far as drought right across the country. We talked to people last night from Saskatchewan. We're all seeing the changes, and I think it's extremely important that we maintain those investments in those areas to ensure that small farmers, where I come from, they're all small farmers, by the way, and it's extremely important for me to ensure that we're doing everything.
Comment va votre travail, Monsieur le Ministre, pardon? Comment va votre...
Mr. Minister, how is your work going in reviewing the BMR programs? The deadline of 2028 is fast approaching. It's going to be difficult to promise a lot more than that than you had in your platform. Any solutions?
Well, to be quite honest with you, we had these discussions not that long ago about how we can actually expedite that process. But that's going to take, we want to make sure that we don't do it in a way that we're going to detract from consultation from the groups, and we want to make sure that everybody has a fair say and every province has a fair say. And back to, there is a regional difference, but we need to take all aspects into consideration.
OK. Ça va prendre des investissements.
It's going to require some investment, and it doesn't have to always be very expensive either. In the agri-food industry, I believe you were part of this committee when we looked into agri-food fees, and we saw that there was a lack of investment in our infrastructure. It's important. We need to modernize. We have some labor issues that we need to address. There's temporary foreign workers that we talk about a lot, but there's also agri-food. Do you have any good news for us? Because you talked about 200 million. We think that it should be at least 400 million.
Well, I think, you know what, I think likely some of the best outlooks in this industry and sector is agri-food and value add. And we're starting to see that across the country, which is going to help everybody because it's an ecosystem of a feeder system. And we'll continue to invest in that. But we're also looking at private investment. We've also seen what FCC has done with their $2 billion investment fund, taking an equity share in a company in British Columbia, which has never been done before.
Je m'attends à ce qu'il y ait quelque chose dans le budget.
I do expect there to be something addressing this in the budget. Some things are easier to address and less expensive, and I think it would be easier for a minister to deal with them, especially since you were a former member of this committee. Programs of anticipatory payment. We've been asking for years. Farmers have been asking for increases constantly, and you had increased it for certain farmers who were impacted by the commerce with China, and we think it costs maximum $60 million per year, which is not a lot. Can you commit to making those increases?
No, I won't commit to making those increases today, but I can tell you that we can take a look at it and see where it's at. But it's certainly something that, a $60 million investment is certainly important, but it's also, I want to ensure that we're not taking away from another program that may be even more important or just as important in your mind or everybody else's.
Si jamais vous vous engagez à y travailler, moi je m'engage.
If you committed to working on that, I would commit to helping you, but things need to advance.
Now we'll turn to the Conservatives for 5 minutes. Mr. Epp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister. Pickling cucumbers. They're brined in open vats in the U.S., imported into Canada. That's not allowed here. So would you support the creation of a processed food for further processing category so we can have value-added production here in Canada?
I think based on our most recent conversations with the business that was in your riding or a friend of yours, Mr. Epp, I think it would be most appropriate to take a look at that and see if there's opportunities there to grow the economic side of that within the boundaries of export and without, interfering with any trade values that might pose impediments to another country. I would like to.
I'll hold you to a yes. Thank you, Minister. How active is your ministry with Codex Alimentarius regulatory processes, harmonization discussions, particularly with respect to MRLs and AIs?
Look, I've been only in this job for about 5.5 months, and, the process that I put myself on was to get to the farmers, to get to the farm gates and talk to them and find exactly what the issues are. As time goes on, then we were diversifying trade. That was a priority. We're still in that mode, and now it's continuing with trade discussions with basically 2 countries, although the diversification is taking us other places as well. So as time goes on, I'll learn more about the file in that regard.
Thank you. I'll ask your ministry to table something with the Committee on Codex Alimentarius, if that's all right. When do you anticipate the completion date of CFIA's SRM process? And I'm talking about the seed regulatory modernization process begun in 2020. Do you have an anticipation date and completion date, sorry?
I actually met with the seed guys this morning, and we had this discussion on. And there's still a little bit of back and forth with the seed guys, and we want to ensure that we have everybody's input before that's done. But it's really close right now.
So, pending the completion of the consultation period, will you support legislation around the value use agreements to modernize our regulatory structure?
Maybe I'll turn that over to my deputy. Is that the process?
So, thank you very much. So, on the issue of are you talking about the VUAs? I assume.
VUAs, correct.
Yeah. So we're continuing to talk to Seeds Canada,
Maybe you can just,
but also producers, because I think the view here is we need to find a system where both the private investors are there, but there's the producers themselves feeling they're getting maximum value. So our view on this is the best thing to do is get the seed industry together with the producers and get them to kind of have common cause and work together with them.
Thank you. It was raised earlier around the temporary foreign worker program. Conservatives are going to have a separate program for agriculture. Or do you support the SOP program, the continuation of SOP?
I don't. You know what? I don't know if how complicated it is separating out temporary foreign workers for the farm program. Under my mandate and under my portfolio, I have seafood, I have processors, which you're talking about. So I think that if the program is going to be reviewed, it has to be reviewed in a manner that takes into consideration all those sectors.
Will you commit to keeping the SOP program?
Deputy.
I think we would come back to you on that.
In writing. Thank you, sir. Yeah, that is huge for my riding, for my greenhouse industry, where I'm going to next. They're listening. $1.7 billion that's traded across the border annually, so efficient, harmonized regulatory processes are critical for market access with the U.S. Will you support a harmonized pest risk assessments with the U.S. to allow the establishment of a North American pest and disease perimeter?
Thank you, Chair. So I think the issue here is, we each have our separate legislative frameworks, and so it would be more than just a matter of harmonization. It would actually have to involve thinking about the legislation.
I understand, but the U.S. is very, very quick to block imports when there's a pest involved, and unfortunately our CBSA is not so quick. That's why the industry is pushing for a North American perimeter that's harmonized. On the topic of harmonization with the U.S., do you support harmonized organic production standards with the U.S.? Because right now production is moving to the U.S., so the organic production can be imported into Canada.
So let me take a step back to your first question, Mr. Epp, if I could. Most recently in China, one of the impediments and barriers that I found was the regulatory alignment with 2 countries. Exactly what you're talking about, only it's the U.S. So we agreed actually to have Seneca, who is their representatives in Mexico. And we basically told Seneca and CFIA within months, 3 months I think it was, that they have to sit down and meet, and we have to go through our regulatory and
Will
align.
you do that with the U.S. as well?
Well, that's what I'm getting at, Mr. Epp. If there's an opportunity at the right time to do that, it would make my job a heck of a lot easier if we could do something like that. So at some point, when we get through the next phases of the trade issues that we're facing, I would be more than happy to sit down with my counterpart and seeing if we can devise that.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go to MP Harrison online for 5 minutes. You're on mute, MP. And beautiful backdrop again. Oh.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Sorry.
You're good now.
Hi. Thank you for joining us, Minister. And I join you today from my small farm in the riding of Peterborough. You can see we started setting out the bales for, we're starting to bale graze soon. So thank you for joining us, and hi committee. I miss you all. As a member of the, as a member of Parliament for Peterborough, I've had the opportunity to speak to many farmers in my community, and being a beef farmer myself, one of the concerns I've heard, especially from the Beef Farmers Canada, is their need for reliable access in the international markets for beef. But I have to tell you, people are very delighted to hear about all of your trade missions and how you've been moving very quickly all across the globe, talking agriculture everywhere. So I was wondering if you could please share with the committee some details about your most recent trade mission to Mexico, and hearing about the importance of these missions and what you've accomplished in visiting.
Thank you. Mexico is a very interesting country, and when you do these trade missions, as many know around the table, you're never quite sure what to expect, but I can tell you Mexico was a very fruitful mission. I think we accomplished quite a bit, and I'll go back to Mr. Epp. First and foremost, I think when I walked away from the meeting and we agreed to have a regulatory alignment of some description and have them meet on that regard, I think that's most producers right now that export into other countries was first and foremost pleased with that assessment. The other aspect of this is Mexico City is where we were stationed for the first little while, has 23 million people there and a growing middle class, which is extremely important. They import about 40%, a little over 40% of their food, so there's opportunities there for us. So we have to, find ways to build on that, build on those the impediments that are there to reduce them and make trade much easier, and we've agreed to do that. The other thing, obviously, many of you are aware that JBS, along with the Canadian Cattlemen Association, and were there basically. They were moving beef into 41 stores, 41 Costco stores. This was going on for about a year. So it was a really great initiative to get across the line. And then, they're planning on building, I think it was 3 more stores in the next year. So there's lots that happened on that trip. Mexico reached trade with a bilateral agreement with us. It's about $6.9 billion, a 44% increase since 2019, driven by complementary exports and imports. And then having our Prime Minister go there with having a comprehensive strategy with the new president and former that relationship was extremely important and kind of laid the groundwork for us to be able to go in and to deal with it. And there's been lots of relevant to the beef. That's an opportunity, but there's been opportunities in canola as well. There's been opportunities in oats to Mexico. We were in one plant basically that had a long line of equipment, modified equipment for innovative process of building or packaging granola bars. They were doing 800 granola bars a minute using Canadian oats, and they were working around the clock 7 days a week. So there's potential there. I look forward to further communications with the minister and seeing what we can do on the front of, first and foremost, I think ensuring that phytosanitary certificates are similar in both countries, and providing information back to CFIA to ensure that our due process is in line with theirs. We also had the opportunity to get pet food across the line, which wasn't basically allowed in Mexico, which again is further to our beef industry. It allows them to utilize all of the animal. And then we had apples from the East Coast that we had access to in Mexico. So it's moving in the right direction. People are willing to do business, and I look forward to getting back there soon and doing some more, because I think there's opportunities are endless, and it's not just beef, it's other sectors as well.
Left.
I don't know if I have much. Do I have much time left?
20 seconds.
Oh, well, enjoy your committee, everybody. I don't think that's enough time to ask a question. And the minister answered more than I was expecting. So thank you very much, Minister.
Okay. Mr. Perot.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister, I'd like to ask, you about organic farming. There is a potential for growth, but there are some regulatory obstacles that are limiting its growth and competitiveness. What is your department doing with regards to lightening the red tape in order to improve that sector? Perhaps, for example, we should stop having to fight for more funding every 5 years for various standards, which could be a permanent solution. Anything else?
I think the organic sector, obviously, they were in my office. I had a couple of meetings with them. I have organic farms in my riding. It's something that the organic trade is obviously growing, and will certainly ensure that the organic have an opportunity to talk about or within the policy framework as well. And I'm just learning more about the organic, to be quite honest. And yes, the funding every 5 years was something that they raised with me, and it's something that we'll look at.
Okay. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you. I have more questions. With regards to labeling and appropriate labeling for foreign products, there were some exchanges on obstacles. Some countries, for example, in the UK, there are some barriers to proper labeling. And for example, in Quebec, we have tons of carrots, but there are supermarkets that are selling carrots from China, but they aren't necessarily properly labeled as coming in from China. That's a huge issue. Of course, there is a part of that is the provinces, under the province's jurisdiction, but I do think that the federal government could also look into respecting these standards. Once the goods are in the country, then that's federally regulated. How come we are letting products that use pesticides, for example, that are banned here elsewhere, come in to the country?
Oh, you're off.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la question.
Thank you for the question. This is a topic that comes up occasionally.
Imported product needs to meet the same standards domestically. So if there are any situations, be it carrots or any other products, the requirements are very clear. And if there are any requirements that you're aware of, either on pesticide limits or on not meeting our labeling requirements, that would be a contravention. We uphold the same standards for imported products as domestic. And if you are aware of any, we definitely would look into those and take action.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to the service for 5 minutes. Mr. Gord.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister. Congratulations. That is a very prestigious title, but it comes with very big responsibilities. Do you know how many farms there are across Canada?
How many, pardon?
The number of farmers across Canada.
I can't hear on here.
Do you know the number of farmers? Do you have a number? Do you know how many farmers there are?
Est-ce que vous avez l'âge moyen de ces producteurs agricoles?
Do you know on average how old these farmers are?
I know we have an aging demographic in the farming community.
Donc, compte tenu que les producteurs sont vieillissants.
So, given that it is an aging population, they will likely have to transfer their farms. There is a capital gains tax increase from 50 to 66%. Is that going to help, or is that going to harm the transfer?
One of the first decisions that we made as a government was to get rid of the carbon tax and to the capital gains. So, and I believe hopefully we'll have some good news in the budget.
Excusez, Monsieur le Ministre, je pense que vous n'avez pas compris la question.
I'm sorry, I don't think you understood my question. When there's a lot of tax issues involved in transferring a farm. The capital gains tax increase is going to harm the new generation of farmers who won't be able to take on those farms because they'll have to pay a lot of taxes, which will be transferred onto the new generation from 50 to 66%, and farms are increasing, are more valuable now than they were. How are you going to help this new generation that will have accrued debt during the transfer of the farm?
I think we increased the capital gains to 1.25 million. Exemption, yeah.
Est-ce que vous avez une vision d'ici 15 ans?
Do you have an idea of how many farmers will remain in this country in the next 25 years, given the policies that are implemented that will make the transfer of farms even more expensive?
So the inclusion rate has been maintained at 55%. Is that correct? Is that what you're asking me?
Je pensais que le ministère avait une
I thought the department had, you know, some sort of insight on agriculture. There is no future of agriculture without farmers. With all the answers you're giving me, you don't seem to understand my question, but they're very simple questions. Is the tax in Canada for farmers during farm transfers accommodating for farmers, or is it going to eliminate an entire generation of farmers?
Maintain the tax inclusion at 55%. That's where it is now, right? I don't.
On va
Speak, yeah, go ahead.
si vous avez quand même, on va continuer. Si vous avez des
We're going to move on. If you have any data you can provide to the committee, that'd be great.
The deputy.
Non,
may have
excusez,
some
Monsieur le
input.
ministre, je veux parler à vous. Moi, je vais vous parler à
I'm sorry, I want to speak to you, Minister. I want to speak to the man who is in the position of Minister. Right now, there's a decline of farmers that is accelerating. Your role as Minister is to speak to your department and find solutions to help guarantee the future of agriculture. And that means that we have to guarantee that there are people who actually want to continue farming. What are you going to implement to help them? You are in a position of privilege. You have a certain responsibility to make sure that we have farmers at all in Canada, to make sure that we can farm. Temporary foreign workers are not always going to do our farming. We need Canadian farmers. Is the Department of Agriculture concerned for what's to come in the next 25 years?
Sector, including agriculture. It's extremely important to the economy of this country, and we'll do everything we can to ensure that young farmers, generational, I met quite a few of them last night, actually, over the last 3 or 4 days and through my travels. Farming is generational. Long after you and I are gone as politicians, farmers will still be here.
Merci.
Thank you.
Next to the Liberals for 5 minutes, MP Mingarelli.
Thank you so much. Merci d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Minister. Since the beginning of my mandate, I've had the opportunity to visit many farms in Prescott, Russell, Cumberland. And I've exchanged directly with farmers and producers on the challenges that they're facing. In fact, my first official activity after I was sworn in as MP was to welcome you, Mr. Minister, at the Gilletta Ambron farm on May 23rd. You also recently visited the Dunrobin distillery in Van Cleek Hill last week on October 10th. One of the concerns that is shared by many farmers is the difficulty they have of marketing their local products across Canada. What measures is your department going to put in place federally to reduce commercial interprovincial obstacles which prevent agri-food products to be sold freely across the country?
I think it's a good question. It's extremely important. I think what we've done recently with internal trade right across the country, I think is going to help those farmers do more and maybe sell more, become more profitable. And I think, I'm not sure if I caught, but if you mentioned exports or not, outside of the country, I think it's extremely important. Again, one thing that I became very aware of very quickly is, along with Minister Trevor Jones from Ontario, and Ron Kostishin from Winnipeg is that all our embassies right across around the globe, that where we have Canadian embassies, actually have agriculture staff within them. So it's extremely important. I don't think there's too many other industries or sectors that have that. We'll continue to bring down barriers from province to province. I believe it's extremely important that we're able to trade within this country. I was part of the Canadian Free Trade Agreement back in 2018 as a provincial member. And at that time it became very frustrating, and here we are again doing it again. And I think now with the geopolitical situation we find ourselves in, I think it's extremely important that all the provinces have come together and ensuring that we can trade freely within this country, which we should have been doing a long time ago. So I think it's a great initiative, and I'm happy to say that hopefully all sides, every party is on the same boat, because I think it's extremely important to agriculture and agri-food.
Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you. There will be, so beyond the eliminating these obstacles, farmers are also saying that they need more practical support with regards to infrastructure, helping with marketing and accessing distribution networks in order to reach these new markets. How is your department making efforts on the ground in order to help local farmers to expand their clientele across Canada?
I think we have a Export Canada, which has bureaucrats basically that do this type of stuff. We also have in-house at Ag Canada relevant to ensuring that the appropriate processes are followed. So I think there's lots of opportunities if organizations. Any type of organization wants to reach out to our office, we'll certainly put them in touch with the right people. But we've done quite a bit just recently in the ag marketing side, which they have access to as well. And I think ag marketing is now at $75 million, and it's open to any sector within the agri-food and agriculture business. So we'll ensure that's likely one of the main ones. It seems to be a very popular one with farmers. So we'll continue to build on that.
Merci. J'ai combien de temps qu'il me reste?
Thank you. How much time do I have left?
Terminé. Merci, Monsieur.
That's it with my questions. Thank you.
Enough time for one quick round. We're going to do 5, 5, and 2.5. So I'll go to Mr. Blanc for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister, Canada's beef sector is still operating under stricter specified risk material rules than many of our trading partners. And the CFIA has been extremely slow to update these regulations, and they prevented Canada from achieving full negligible risk status for BSE, costing our producers immense amounts of money. Is this a priority for your government?
Go ahead. Get CFIA sitting right here.
I can assure you it's a priority that the minister has, and that we're working as quickly as we can to advance those regulations.
So CFIA has missed the deadline for SMR negligible risk status. Are you going to hold your department to account for this?
The deadline, I don't know what he's talking about.
When?
I'm not sure what deadline, Mr. Chair, through you, the member is referring to. I'm not aware of any deadline that the department has missed as it relates to specified risk material. We still have an active negligible risk status that is active and is acknowledged by the World Organization of Animal Health.
Do you know how much this is costing our producers?
Approximately $25 million a year.
When is your plan to have this status updated?
We're working actively, including with industry, to work on the policy work that needs to be done to do the regulations. There's no less than 5 regulations that need to be updated to make this change. We are working through that, and what we actually also are doing is working with our trading partners. As I've mentioned before at this committee, we do not want to make any changes that could jeopardize any of our market access, and we actually have been in touch with the U.S. Unfortunately, there isn't anyone on the other side right now that we can speak to, given the labor situation in the U.S., but it's important for us to do that work, and we're doing that in parallel as we do the policy work to advance the regulations.
Okay, I'll just shift gears here a little bit. So strychnine was banned, and farmers in Saskatchewan have reported severe crop crop losses due to this. Is there a federal plan to compensate producers for their losses, and or is Ottawa going to ignore their decision here?
Well, we've had several discussions with the Minister of Saskatchewan in regards to this, and actually R.J. Sigerson, the Minister of Alberta, raised this several times. So the process is in place. We're waiting, I believe, for there is a clause in there that there's an exemption that can be applied. I haven't seen any requests at my office. I can't speak for CFIA right now, obviously, but I don't know. Has there been any, or PMRA, sorry, has there been any requests that you know? I know.
Will you support producers or provinces if they apply for the exemption?
Would I?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Because the alternative strychnine are far more expensive and far less effective, and it's very important for our producers that this matter is taken seriously and quickly. Another thing I'd like to ask you about, Mr. Minister, is the EV mandates. And there's a 100% zero emissions mandate on heavy trucks and semi-trucks by 2040. And has your department done any analysis on this to see the effect it will have on agriculture and agriculture producers?
Well, within the first 5 months that I've been here, no, not that I'm aware of, but I'll turn to my deputy as he was here longer than that.
Thanks. I think any analysis of this will have been done by ECCC in the context of the regulatory impact assessment statement for the actual EV mandate. So we can go back and see what analysis was done by ECCC in that context.
Do you know of any farm producer groups? Have they been consulted on this?
I think we'd have to get those numbers as part of the RIAS.
So, Minister, you support a government that's imposing a 100% EV mandate on farmers, and so far we don't know anything about the cost-benefit analysis of this or what it's going to cost farmers directly. Do you think you could come back and table those numbers with us?
We'll check with EDC and see where it's at. I'm pretty much open to anything, but I would like to more information on it before I make a decision on it.
Mm-hmm. This is very, very worrying for our farmers. We have almost no infrastructure that's built up for this, and the cost of electric vehicles are exorbitant compared to the traditional vehicles that they're using now.
I fully understand your comment and your issue, and it's 2040, so time will, the longer I'm here, the more I'll learn about it and I'll understand it better and maybe have a better answer for you.
One thing, we had two witnesses that apply. We had two witnesses that appeared before our committee, and they had cases of TB in their herds, and they're working with CFIA to get through this. And the process has been extremely frustrating and cumbersome for them. Can you commit that CFIA will streamline the process so that producers have some certainty when it comes to these cases?
Well, one of my first decisions as a minister was increase the compensation from 6.5 to, you know what it is, 12.5, 12.5, 12,500 to, was it 19.5 or 25? So,
I have to go to the next person. Mr. Connors.
Mr. Minister, this new government has reduced the inclusion rate of capital gains to 50% and increased the capital gain exemption to $1.25 million. Will that help the intergenerational transfer of farms?
decision based on a reversal of what it was before. So, you know, to be quite honest, in the 5 months that I've been here, I haven't heard a lot relevant to that, maybe from the opposition, but from the farmers that I've talked to. I think there's lots of other things going on right now that they're more worried about, but it's something that we'll continuously evaluate as we move forward and see where it's at.
Okay, and just a quick question, like the agricultural industry has young farmer programs and new entrant programs in supply management. Should that help with the new entrants coming into farming in the coming years?
Well, look, I think there's lots of opportunities for young people in farming. We just have to ensure that we put the resources in place to allow them to do it. I mean, we need export is a big part of our economy. It's a big part of farming. We're feeding Canadians, but we're also feeding the world. So I think anything that we can do and any policies that we can make to make it easier for the younger generations to get in farming, we should be looking at.
Thank you. I'm going to share the rest of my time with MP Harrison.
MP Harrison, you have roughly 3 minutes left.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for having me back. Minister, you completed a trade mission in Indonesia and Singapore and the Philippines. I'd like you to speak, if you wouldn't mind, a bit more about that and what other international markets might we be exploring for Canada?
Well, I'll go to your second question first. And a lot of my guidance basically is coming from industry on where we should be going and what direction we should be moving in as far as international trade and export. And I think it comes back to our capacity as a country to ensure that we have the products that countries want. And in this role, you could be flying all over the world every other week, but I need to ensure that if it's the Canadian Cattlemen Association or any other producer of its lentils, peas, canola, pulses, I need to ensure that I'm going in a direction that they want to go in, where there's logistical relevance as well to ensure that they get a fair price for their product. The Indo-Pacific, we have an office in Manila, very beneficial to us. At some point in time, I'd like to see more offices in more international places. We exported $22 billion worth of agriculture and agri-food products to the Indo-Pacific region, and it's a constant growing market. The Indo-Pacific is our second largest regional export market and trading partner. So I think it's safe to say that my trip to Indonesia was very beneficial. We signed a bilateral agreement with Indonesia. We're moving very quickly to move more beef to Indonesia and canola in that regard. So I think there's lots of opportunities. And with the ASEAN countries, I think we're only going to see that grow as their populations grow and their middle class grow.
Thank you. So many of the farmers I've spoken with were really optimistic about the growth opportunities in the Indo-Pacific region. Could you speak a little bit about, more specifically, about any other international markets that are being explored or prioritized for Canadian beef?
Well, I think right now, look, the priority is the existing markets that we have. I mean, it's great to talk about diversification, but I recognize the fact that China is a big market for our canola. 96% of our agricultural food product is moving across the U.S. border tariff-free at the present time. So we want to keep those markets. We want to do everything we can, but in the same breath, I think every farmer and every organization that we talk to specifically says diversification is extremely important, but we want to maintain our markets in those countries as much as possible. So there's a twofold to this: work hard, get to new prospects, and trade and export, but also in the same breath, work hard to keep the markets that we have. We've seen a lot of diversification in this country in agriculture. The technology and innovation is second to none in any sector. If we look at car manufacturing, it's about 2.2%.
I'll give you an extra 15 seconds. I apologize for cutting you off. Mr. Perron for the final 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. You just talked about beef and pork exports. Canada is about to ratify a new agreement with the UK in order for them to be included in the Trans-Pacific Agreement, and our farmers are worried about not, having access to those markets. Have you had any guarantees? Have you had any discussions about that?
What products are you talking about?
Bœuf et porc, entre autres.
Beef and pork, among others.
Well, look, we're in a geopolitical situation, and the message that I'm getting from my stakeholders is push on the door that's open. And the Mexico door was open, Indonesia door was open, and I think at some point in time, yes, that's certainly an issue. But right now,
Celle de la Grande-Bretagne, Monsieur le Ministre, est-ce qu'elle va...
And what about the UK's door? Is it going to open? Because signing commercial agreements is great, but it has to be, beneficial to our farmers.
Yeah, certainly. And I think when there's going to be a time come that we have to negotiate with the UK in relevance to beef and what they've done to Canada, and that's something that we'll do. But at the present time and for the past really 4 months, my job was basically try to open the markets that were existing and then diversify into new markets, and that's what I'm trying to do.
With regards to genomic products, you know how I feel about that because you were at the committee, or you were a member of the committee when we talked about it. It's a very interesting technology, but has to be labeled, and the government should also work on that.
That is something certainly for review, and I appreciate your comments on it, and I know how strongly you feel.
Well, you can count on me if you want to work on that, but you have to, make progress because it's easy to say that you support it here, but then you actually have to do something about it. So we had some discussions on funding, especially for processing products that are under supply management. Is it the end of those programs?
No, I don't believe so.
C'est fini. Un petit peu encore?
Is my time up? Do I have still more time? Great. The chair is being generous today. It's your lucky day. So I'd like to hear more about the PMRA's efficiency. You've certainly listened in on our studies here. When we've talked about the drones, the drone spraying, for example, and Mr. Yaniro was saying that they've been working on the BMR, but we've been hearing that for 2 years. We've also been talking about drone spraying, pesticide spraying for 2 years, but it feels like they should have been authorized more rapidly, and now they're going to be approved in smaller quantities. What do you think of that?
Look, I think innovation technology is sometimes regulations are not moving quick enough.
Thank you very much, Minister, and to all of our guests here today, thank you for joining us, and we appreciate your time. We'll suspend for 5 minutes and come back and start with our second half. New witnesses, please wait till I recognize you before speaking, or if you're being directly asked a question by the Member of Parliament. We only have one person on Zoom, MP Harrison, so she knows the rules. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motions adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18, 2025, the committee is resuming its study on government's regulatory reform initiative in agriculture and agri-food. We've got three witnesses here today. The Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute, Tyler McCann, Precision AI, Inc., Mr. McCann's joining us, and Five Crop Protection, Daryl Anderson. You each have up to 5 minutes, and then what we'll do is we'll open it up in a rotation from each party. Why don't we start off with Darren? Are you fine to start? Okay, great. Welcome. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. Sorry, technology's working? All right. My name is Dr. Darren Anderson, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Vive Crop Protection. We're a Canadian agricultural technology company headquartered in Mississauga, Ontario. Vive is Canada's only domestic developer and manufacturer of differentiated crop protection and is based on technology originally developed at the University of Toronto. We strengthen the agricultural sector and global food security with innovative products that deliver substantial benefits to Canadian farmers. We employ over 65 people in Canada and the US. Despite Vive being a homegrown success, our first Canadian product approval from the PMRA came only in 2023, 7 years after the same product was approved in the US. That delay meant that Canadian farmers had to wait while American farmers gained the benefits of a made-in-Canada innovation. That can't continue. Canada needs a regulatory system that rewards innovation, environmental sustainability, and improving farm productivity, not one that drives investment and technology elsewhere. I believe instead of our regulatory system being a barrier to innovation, it can be a catalyst so that Canadian farmers are some of the first to gain access to new innovations. Canada has a unique opportunity to lead in agricultural innovation and productivity. Canada should be punching above our weight in agriculture. In almost every other industry, companies like VIVE should go to the US first, because the market tends to be 10 times larger due to 10 times the population. However, in Canada, our $150 billion agri-food sector is about half the size of the US agri-food sector. This creates an opportunity to build for Canada first. This is Canada's moment to lead. Other countries are already modernizing their regulatory systems. Brazil recently implemented major changes to its regulatory system, cutting approval times dramatically. There was a particular focus for these changes to encourage registration of bio-based crop inputs, a key area of innovation globally. Biologicals now account for over 10% of Brazil's crop protection market, growing more than 40% annually. Australia has built a system that is rigorous but predictable, and as a result, some global companies launch products there first. The US EPA is currently underfunded and facing growing backlogs. This creates an opportunity for Canada to lead in North America, to become the trusted, science-driven regulator that companies look to first. If we move decisively, we can make Canada the best place in the world to develop, test, and launch agricultural technologies that improve sustainability, productivity, and economic competitiveness. We can become a jurisdiction that combines scientific integrity with speed and predictability. We have 3 core recommendations. First, revise pre-market consultations to improve government transparency, predictability, and certainty. A more open and responsive PMRA can help applicants navigate the regulatory system. This supports innovative companies compared to multinationals with significant in-house resources and will create a more transparent and predictable means of bringing innovative pest control products to Canadian farmers. Canada's economic and food security hinges on the ability to remain competitive in a rapidly evolving global economy. As global value chains become increasingly interconnected and economic nationalism is on the rise, as seen with the tariff issues, the resilience of our economy depends on an efficient, flexible, and responsive PMRA that operates with certainty and predictability. Second recommendation, to leverage regulatory reviews from trusted, risk-based jurisdictions. To reduce duplication and red tape, PMRA should rely on risk assessments already completed in trusted, risk-based jurisdictions. Our proposed approach is to grant provisional registration while allowing PMRA to require additional data or revoke the approval if needed. This approach maintains high standards while ensuring Canada keeps pace with global competitiveness. Third, we should be aiming to transform the PMRA into the most efficient crop protection regulator in the world, and say so loudly. By properly reallocating existing funding, the PMRA can establish a rapid, transparent, and predictable means of bringing innovative pest control products to Canadian farmers while driving a cultural shift to reduce red tape, duplicative effort, and overall costs. Modernizing the PMRA is not just about speed or red tape reduction, it's about economic policy, competitiveness, food security, and sustainability. It's the difference between being a global leader in sustainable agriculture or a follower of our own market. Members of the committee, this is Canada's moment. We cannot afford another lost decade. Canada has already made strides to advance critical areas like oil and gas, with a push to improve pipelines in less than 2 years. These are billion-dollar nation-building initiatives. If those can be approved in 2 years, shouldn't we be able to build a system where Canadian innovation benefits Canadian farmers in less than half the time? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next we'll go to Precision AI. 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Is this working? Can you hear me? Yep, okay. Hi, I'm Daniel McCann. I'm the founder and CEO of Precision AI. We're a Canadian artificial intelligence company that's focused very specifically on building artificial intelligence models for the agricultural sector. We're doing a lot of work in applied agricultural models, so building them into machinery that actually operates on the farm as well, to be able to provide quantifiable reductions in pesticide, reductions in fertilizer use, and improved farm unit economics. My background is that I was raised in the farming family in Saskatchewan, Canada. Obviously, very proud Saskatchewanite. I did that. I was raised there for about 20 years and then ran off and became a tech entrepreneur. So I started a few companies in technology and ended up coming back to the farm. The reason for that is because I saw a generational opportunity, something that comes along, once in a lifetime, where the application of artificial intelligence to agriculture has the ability to be not just a step change in agriculture, but profoundly one of the most important innovations and important step changes in global agriculture that we've ever seen. Probably equivalent, if not greater, in potential for moving, from, for example, the horse to the tractor. And the reason I make such a bold claim is because the amount of waste in agriculture is absolutely significant. We over-fertilize, we overspray, we do a lot of things that are bad for farm sustainability, but also bad for farm economics. And through artificial intelligence, we actually have the ability to take our farming decisions from really inefficient, field scales where we don't really know what's going on, down to actually individual plant-level decision-making. And the amount of economic gain you can get from that is staggering. Just to put things in context, I like giving case studies. So we developed an artificial intelligence model that can recognize and isolate weeds from crop and allow crop spraying to just weeds instead of spraying the entire field. Through field trials, we were able to quantifiably reduce pesticide by 83% and also fertilizer by 60% while improving yield by 2%. In farm economics terms, that's well over $100 an acre. So very, very significant economics. So we built this technology into swarms of crop spraying drones that could actually use artificial intelligence to scan fields and apply pesticides just to the places where they need to be applied. And we can't sell it in Canada. So that's a problem. Largely because of the regulatory environment. There's a variety of regulatory policies in place that were put in place long before artificial intelligence was even conceptualized as a possibility on the farm, and so they don't allow for progress in this area. And so we desperately need to modernize that in order to allow us to be competitive. And so I think we have 4 areas or 4 pillars that we can modernize. And the first one is to create a regulatory sandbox. Where innovators such as Precision AI, as well as other companies, can actually go and test these new technologies on very, very limited scale fields so that we can actually collect the data that we need to prove the safety and efficacy of the systems. The second one, in addition to a regulatory sandbox, is predictable timelines for approvals. As you all well know, when you're dealing with modern agricultural technology, the ability to fund it and see it through to commercialization is very important. And with no certainty on timelines, there's no certainty for the investors that invest into these capital solutions. And so there's a dearth of capital in Canada as well. As Mr. Anderson said, the other one is to allow research from other regions. Currently, with the PMRA right now, you cannot look at research. With drone spraying as an example, there's a variety of data from all over the world that we actually can't look at, and we have to recreate those research studies ourselves domestically. That doesn't make any sense. And then the last one is to consolidate approvals. So for drone spraying, you've got multiple regulatory agencies like Transport Canada and the PMRA that all sort of work together and create multiples of uncertainty. So can you have like a concierge, as an example, a regulatory concierge, to allow innovators like us to be able to move quickly through these processes? And in conclusion, I'm going to say I think it's really important. We've got the science, we've got the technology, we've got the talent, and we've got agriculture is one of the most important industries in Canada. We can be a world leader again in this space if we let our racehorses run domestically here in Canada instead of having them both literally and figuratively go down to Kentucky to run in the Kentucky Derby. So, thank you.
Presentation, Tyler McCann.
Thank you very much. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président et membres du comité.
Hello to the committee, and thank you for the invitation. The committee's work on regulatory reform is crucial. There is a necessity to double the work or to go faster. The fact that everybody is happy to participate demonstrates how important this work is.
That focuses on growth by adding value through investment and innovation and risk mitigation in an era of increased volatility and uncertainty. Regulatory reform is essential for both. Not a day goes by without us running into the issue of regulatory reform. We read studies that highlight Canada's poor performance in global rankings, the cost of regulatory accumulation, and the potential benefits of reducing regulatory burden. We hear it when we talk to farmers, processors, and the sector about the challenges facing ag innovation, investment attraction, and why other countries perform better than Canada does. In our 2024 Agri-Food Risk Survey, the policy and regulatory environment was the highest ranking risk facing the sector. Not only did respondents identify it as a top risk, they expressed little confidence in our ability to mitigate it. It's not a surprise that there was no confidence in our ability to mitigate extreme weather or geopolitics, but the domestic policy and regulatory environment is entirely within our control. We should be able to do something about it. In 2025, we asked an additional question about why respondents selected the policy and regulatory environment as a risk. The good news is that the policy and regulatory risk was not the top risk this year. The bad news is that's because all of the other risks are getting worse. But when we asked what leads to your belief that policy and regulatory risk is an issue, 50% of the respondents selected unnecessary regulatory burden as the driver. In the conclusions from our first risk report, we highlighted the need for government to do less, but for government to do what it does better. Smart regulations is a key to doing it better. The need for smarter regulations highlights the critical role that regulations play. A smart regulatory framework provides credibility for customers and end users, facilitates trade, encourages investment, provides predictability and certainty for regulated parties. But bad regulations work against all of those things. I think there are 4 things that are needed for a smart regulatory approach. The first is enabling legislation. The Safe Food for Canadian Act modernized much of the legislative framework, but there are opportunities for further legislative reform, including in the Grains Act and the Seeds Act. The second is an enabling regulatory framework. There is significant room for improvement in delivering a regulatory framework that's focused on health and safety that enables growth and facilitates investment. The third is ensuring that regulatory bodies have the resources they need to effectively deliver regulations. Efficient delivery is critical, but it is important that regulators have the resources they need to do their job. Finally, it is having the right regulatory culture. This is often the most challenging and the hardest to change, which brings me to 6 regulations focused on creating a better regulatory system. First, the minister should appoint a new CFIA ministerial advisory body. The board should first be given 30 days to provide recommendations on strategic reform of the CFIA and other regulatory agencies, including the PMRA and the Grain Commission. The recommendations should touch on structure, oversight, and mandate. Second, the government should reform and institutionalize the Agile Regulations Table, providing it with independence and the mandate to establish regulatory modernization priorities and the tools needed to hold regulatory agencies to account. Third, the government should appoint a regulatory ombudsman who can solicit feedback from stakeholders, report publicly on challenges, and make recommendations for further reform and modernization. Fourth, the government should establish a regulatory performance framework that directs regulatory agencies on the need for timely, risk-based regulations and decisions. Fifth, this committee should hold annual hearings to solicit stakeholder priorities, make recommendations, and report on progress or lack thereof by departments. And finally, I want to triple the support for amending the legislation so that we can accept foreign or provisional registration of feed, seed, and other crop inputs that are approved by equivalent foreign regulatory systems. These recommendations reflect the reality that we will not have meaningful regulatory change when the officials that have created it, managed it, and lived within the regulatory framework are the ones that are tasked with modernizing it. There's a need for leadership, oversight, and accountability if we really want to reduce the regulatory burden that holds the sector back. I know you've heard of specific changes from other witnesses, but I believe systemic changes are the only way to unlock the sector's full potential. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barlow.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. Excellent presentations, and I really appreciate it when you come with solutions to some of the problems that were being addressed. And I found it interesting that our witnesses talked about the fact that we have the science. And I would agree with you, but what concerned me in the previous panel, I don't know if you had a chance to hear, but with every question that we asked the minister, the answer was, sure, we have the science, but these are geopolitical issues, so we're not going to do these things. And that worries me a great deal, that we are making decisions based on geopolitics rather than standing up for the science and the regulations and the protocols that we have here in Canada. So I think there is a deeper culture issue here within this government that needs to be addressed. Mr. McCann, you made an interesting point in one of your recommendations, and that was to appoint a regulatory ombudsman. In the previous Conservative government, we had a redress officer within CFIA that the Liberal government eliminated. Would that redress officer be similar to what you're recommending in this ombudsman? As I remember from the statistics previously, about a quarter of the complaints to the redress officer were justified and needed to be resolved. That gave accountability to the CFIA. Would this be a similar role, or would this be different?
I think the role would be similar. I think that there's an opportunity to make it more independent and provide additional resources for that position so that it can look at CFIA and potentially look at the Grain Commission and PMRA as well. I think CFIA gets a lot of attention, but let's not forget about the other regulatory agencies that impact the sector too.
Yeah, certainly. And I guess that's my next question. I'm going to maybe ask it to all three. Within the Liberal election platform, which I fundamentally agree with, there was a need to change the lens within CFIA and PMRA to ensure that they took economic impact and food security in the decision-making. When we asked CFIA and PMRA officials when they were here, their response was, we don't need to change anything, everything's great. So it concerns me, again, that this is a mandate from the Prime Minister and the Minister that the agencies aren't going to follow up on. Maybe, Mr. Anderson, I'll start with you. Do you believe that there needs to be cultural and fundamental changes within these agencies?
Yeah, absolutely. My perspective is that the mandate around a dual mandate, mandate for a dual mandate, as we say, was actually a quite positive step forward, and actually can be quite powerful around driving that cultural and systemic change. One of the things that would really do is it would create a lens internal to the regulatory agencies on, is this actually improving efficiency? Is it actually improving economic competitiveness across the country, in addition to the mandate to make sure that the health and environmental benefits to Canadians are maintained from these types of products. So I think it's a very useful signaling effort to drive cultural change.
Yeah, same question. Or sorry, I got two Mr. McCanns. So I'll get to take each of you to answer that, please. Sure. As quickly as you can.
Okay. I fundamentally agree with everything that Mr. Anderson has said as well too. I think largely speaking, we need to, at least from my perspective, we need to create a culture within these organizations that recognizes the pace of change that happens in some of these industries. So, as you well know, I come from the artificial intelligence industry. That is the fastest moving industry in the history of humanity. Things get obsolete every 6 months. And if we don't have some sort of cultural framework to be able to adapt to these types of changes, we are going to be left behind. So I think it is very important to really consider the culture of how these organizations operate and to provide innovators with the things that they need to actually advance through the regulatory stuff.
I think when we see this cross-party support for each other's platforms, that's a great thing and a great signal that this is a serious issue. Like there is a reason why this was in, I think, the Liberal platform, and there's a reason why it needs to be delivered on. And I think if you hear some of the statements from CFIA officials, it underscores what that reason is. They do not, I think, fundamentally understand the challenge the sector faces and the need for them to change how they do their work.
Thanks. And Mr. Anderson, looking through VIVE's documents, and you talked about the fact that the 7-year delay, and now we're hearing it's taking up to 12 years for new products to be approved by PMRA, which is just absolutely unacceptable. Certainly, Daniel, would be, you're talking about how fast AI moves, but certainly in your business, it'd be the same. And I believe I saw, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that a number of the products that VIVE makes, again, a Canadian-made company, maybe 14 or 15 of those products are available to producers in the United States and only 1 or 2 in Canada. I really worry that we're losing our best and brightest, that you as a company, why would you be based in Canada if all your business is south of the border? Maybe just talk about the obstacles that you and similar companies are facing trying to do business in Canada compared to what the similar comparison would be in the United States.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So we have, I believe it's 14 product registrations today in the U.S., although we've had a couple come in over the last little bit, so that number may be a little out of date, and 1 product registration in Canada, so your recollection is correct. And to be blunt, we would prefer to be commercializing in Canada as much as possible. There's a real need here. Growers are typically, in our view, underserved because many of the multinationals view Canada as a branch plant type opportunity, and so there's an opportunity for a domestic crop protection company like ours to provide them innovative tools, and we would like to bring them here. The challenge is just around having a predictable and efficient regulatory process where we can really get our innovations here faster than we can in the U.S. We're venture-backed, which means we have investors that have invested in us that are looking to generate a return. They're looking to generate a return on a specific time frame, and if we're going to burn an extra 2, 3, 4 years to get product approval here, that is just not a decision that we can make. And the other element, too, is when you have barriers to innovation in Canada for companies like ours, that also means that capital doesn't flow to Canada, and investors tend to be based elsewhere. And when the capital that's coming into companies like Vive is coming from American investors, European investors, Asian investors, that also decreases the desire to stay here.
Thank you.
Over to the Liberals for 6 minutes. MP Chattel.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I'm going to congratulate you as well because the solutions that you're providing are really great. This is a study where all the parties are working together. I'm very interested in the recommendations that will be brought forth during this study. The problems are well known, and we've heard a lot, and what you're telling us today isn't anything new. We are in solution mode right now. I hear a lot that we need to change the culture and to change the mandate as well. I was looking at the PMRA's economic impact, the CFIA as well. So I think that that's already in their mandate, and therefore we need to be a little bit more ambitious and be more precise. So I'd like to thank Mr. McCann for his recommendations. You bring up points that were already brought up by other stakeholders as well. I'd like to touch upon solutions 2 and 3. You talked about a regulatory roundtable called Agile, which right now seems to not be bearing any fruit. A lot of issues have been identified, 150 of them, in fact, but what to do, it's not clear, and we don't have any ambitious solutions. Say we were to give some real powers to this group and to, give them proper timelines, allow them to make recommendations in order to resolve issues and become more efficient, and even combine them with the powers of an ombudsman. If things weren't going fast enough, what do you think would be your recommendations there? Certainly, the principle of having, these regulatory groups makes them, responsible, means that they have some power, that they can make recommendations that are clear, and that they are independent bodies. The officials around the table, well, they should be working with officials, actually, and they should be able to make recommendations as well as outlining clear priorities to act on. I think it's essential. One of the issues that we have now is that there is within Agriculture Canada some officials that are around the table, and the departments themselves are managing the schedule, for example. But perhaps we could give them a bit more leadership so that the officials have a bit more control on their recommendations. Maybe they need some extra tools. And that would mean that if officials are not respecting the recommendations, it would allow us to make sure that we act. I think action is what's missing here. As you mentioned, the issues are well known. The issue is not that we are not addressing regulatory burden. What we're lacking here is action.
Tout à l'heure, mon collègue.
Earlier, a colleague talked about redress. I want to talk about the ombudsman suggestion. An ombudsman is completely independent and has investigatory powers as well. Their bureau is also independent. Could such an institution bring the sector to become more prosperous and, could it be a call to action, as you said? I don't think that there's one single solution to fix the problem. An ombudsman's position is part of the solution that would elucidate us on some of the issues, for example, those at the heart of the CFIA. It will, galvanize more effort in order to modernize our approach. One of the current issues is that those who are responsible for the decision-making, well, there is no accountability. We need somebody who could shed light on what's happening within an agency in order to inform us on the reasons why some decisions are made. We are not seeing that information right now. We don't have that transparency right now. If somebody like an ombudsman was there, it would help all of us to make sure that the agency performed better. We also heard some witnesses saying that C5 worked because the burden of proof was reversed. So only what was essential was kept. So one of the issues is that there's been an accumulation of regulation without a process to reevaluate old regulation. There's this process of, recommending a table, like a round table like Agile. Can we do that? Can we reverse the burden of proof? You have to act, otherwise these rules and regulations are obsolete, that kind of thing. Yes, I do think that's an excellent idea. Mr. Perron for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. We appreciate your time. I don't know if you're related, the two of you. Mr. Daniel, I'm going to call you by your first names. Your company is doing something very interesting, and I am very interested in what you've suggested. You may have heard me tell the minister earlier and in previous meetings, and it has nothing to do with AI. We're talking about drones. They've been talking about it for 2 years. It hasn't been approved, and the same products are being spread by planes right now. We're just talking about economics, and we're talking about, or rather finance and the environment. It makes absolutely no sense. If we look at a smaller scale, can you provide more explanation?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I fundamentally agree with your assertion that it doesn't make a lot of sense. What matters when it comes to agricultural efficacy is the amount of the droplet distribution and the amount of chemical that's actually applied to the product, the manner that's applied to the crop, and the manner in which it's done, whether it's from a drone or whether it's from a plane or whether it's from a ground piece of equipment, doesn't really matter. So I fundamentally agree. I think the regulations were conceived in a time where drone spraying wasn't a thing. Right, and so it didn't create a pathway for that, and it desperately needs to be reevaluated and thought through from the perspective of outcomes first. What is the outcome you're trying to generate? Can you generate that outcome in a safe manner, and then reverse engineer the platform from there?
You talk about testing the products on smaller scales, on smaller zones. What kind of scale are you talking about? Do you have any examples? Were there any conclusions that were that came up? We'd like more details.
Yes, yeah. So when we've discussed this with our stakeholder group of people in this industry, one of the challenges is, of course, that in order to you're not allowed to actually fly the drones and spray the drones based on our current regulatory environment to collect the data to prove that it's safe, right? So you've got a chicken and egg problem. And so the regulatory sandbox, if you can limit, if the concern of the PMRA is that you don't want people having carte blanche to go and spray unapproved chemicals in unapproved ways, then just create a limited environment where you can collect the data and prove its efficacy. So, 1 acre, 10 acres, it doesn't need to be big. You've got a statistically insignificant amount of impact it can generate, but you can collect the data that you need to prove the safety.
OK, merci. Puis quand vous parlez de...
Thank you. You're talking about predictable deadlines for approvals. What would be reasonable? We think that 7 years is revolting, for example, but I'm not a scientist. We don't want to approve just about anything. What would be the deadlines just to make sure that a certain precaution is applied?
Certainly, I think that needs to be determined on a case-by-case basis, but even the clarity on that would be much more helpful than the current lack of clarity that we currently have. I'm a big believer, and again, to go back to the outcome-based regulatory environment. The regulatory environment we have is good, but it's based on, it's over-indexed on process and under-indexed on outcomes. So if we were to take, for example, something like drone spraying and proving the efficacy of the residual data that the PMRA needs, that can be achieved in a year, right? So you could, and if you wanted to even double that and say 2 years, right, prove it the first year and then see if it replicates the second year, that's 2 years instead of 7, right? That's much more reasonable.
OK. Quand vous parlez de travailler avec les autres régions...
You talk about working with other regions and other jurisdictions. You more or less... All three of you said that. Of course, we can't, give up our environmental sovereignty, if you will. Temperature is not the same. The nature of the soil is different. Like everybody else, I imagine you would like us to move more quickly towards temporary approvals while we conduct tests that are adapted to our specific conditions and climate. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly correct. I think tests that are use the data, let the science guide the data, use the data where it replicates, and in things that we need to adapt, just provide a quick framework for us to adapt those trials to what we're doing.
OK. J'ai beaucoup aimé le...
I appreciated the regulatory concierge term that you used because it's very quick. There's a risk there. So how do we make sure that this is regulation that we have to eliminate?
Can you repeat the question? It wasn't clear. I'm sorry.
In your opening remarks, there's the fourth recommendation. You said that there are a lot of regulations and it would require some sort of regulatory concierge. I liked that expression. It's like doing some housekeeping. How do you determine what is obsolete and what isn't? Because there's so many rules and regulations, and sometimes we'll create a new one without removing an old one. This is pretty serious.
It is. I do agree with that. I think regulations are sort of like a bush that you grow in your yard. If you don't trim it, it'll just grow indefinitely, and then it doesn't get healthy. So we do need some sort of process, whether it's a concierge or something else, to be able to have a regular review of what regulations make sense and what don't anymore.
Puis ça, à ce moment-là, est-ce que ça pourrait être...
In that case, would Mr. McCann's ombudsman be the one to identify the superfluous rules and regulations? Oh, is my time up?
Go ahead, finish your question. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to do one final round. We'll do 4, 4, and 2.5. And I want to keep about 5 minutes at the end just to talk about the calendar for the next couple of weeks. So I'll go to Mr. Epp for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. I found your testimony extremely good and extremely frustrating. This is not new. This we've talked about. We've had this. And I guess where do we go with this? I really appreciate bringing to the table solutions, but I want to get at the underlying fundamental issue somehow to try and move the needle forward on speed. Nobody's talking about denigrating the safety and things like that. And this is not a partisan issue. Around this table, we agree. We heard that in the minister's letter. Mm-hmm. And I think you touched on it, Mr. McCann, on the word culture. And that's where we somehow have to get at. And what I'm reminded of, and I believe I've shared this on the record here before, is advice given to me by a former provincial deputy minister who said, Dave, a hog will never slaughter itself. And I don't mean to denigrate our agencies by using the term, I love pork, and I'm in favor of the pork industry. But it is very difficult to initiate change upon oneself. So to get at the culture, to actually motivate cultural change, what is it going to take? Because we have mandate letters. We have the ideas that have come forward to committee. I'm going to go to each one of you, specifically at the culture. In an organization, how do you motivate that change? I'll start with Mr. Anderson. We'll go across.
So my recommendation around looking at how we are performing relative to peers and setting a goal to be one of or the most efficient regulatory system in the world, and knowing what those measurements are, knowing how we compare to those other regulatory agencies for comparative actions, and setting a goal to drive towards those numbers is one of the things that, in my view, can really drive change. Because right now we're not even keeping score. We don't know if we're winning or losing, and so we think that matters.
Come back to your point, but I want to hear from both McCanns.
Sure. I think the way I think about this is the regulators are all well-intentioned. Everybody wants good things, right? And that's to protect, our environment, to protect people. I think what we just need to do again is we need to just remind ourselves that that process only serves the science, and to really invert that and go back to if you can get the science faster, and if new innovations and new science dictates new methods, we need to have some sort of pathway for those new methods to be reevaluated constantly.
Thank you, Mr. McCann.
We need accountability. I think what we've seen is too much talk. I think if you look at what happened, we've seen a prime minister and the clerk of the Privy Council indicate that they're going to hold public servants to account. We haven't seen that yet. I think if you look at the outcome of the first regulatory reform process, that tells me that the expectations are not being met, and someone needs to be held to account. And that's not a minister. The minister needs to hold his senior officials to account for the work that they're doing or not.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to your idea of metrics. KPIs, comparators to other agencies. You've got the EPA, you've got the Australian system. I don't think anyone believes that those agencies want to poison their own people or their own environment, so we need to bring that in. But if the culture is such that we don't want to accept that, and I'm going to give you an example that comes right out of testimony from the executive officer of CropLife, who expressed his view that no regulator in the world is going to go after cumulative effects, which is what our PMRA has said that that they're interested in pursuing, when no other regulator in the world. That gets at the culture of we are better, or the other agencies aren't up to our internal standards. Can you comment, please?
I would generally agree that I think there are a variety of countries that I think we would consider peers, and we need to be thoughtful about their approaches and not necessarily have a Canada is special and we need to do everything special here. There's no need to reinvent the wheel.
Okay, let me jump in there. MP Harrison, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. I'm going to try to ask really direct questions because I only have 4 minutes. This is very broad to Mr. Daniel McCann, what regulatory changes would needed to be enabled for widespread adoption of drone spraying in Canada?
So I think immediately, again, removing the requirement for residual data. There's lots of the 2 things, I think. Removing the requirement for residual data because nobody else in the world needs that. And then the second one is recognizing the data that's already been produced ad nauseum from every other region that's out there. If you can do those 2 things, I think you can accelerate the process very, very quickly. And again, get back to this concept of it's the science of how the droplets are applied and not the mechanism by which it's being done.
Could you, I'm sorry, I'm unaware, what country is leading in this research and this science?
A lot of that is coming out of the European Union right now. There's drone spraying is very, very large in Asian countries, but the specific countries I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head. But I do know the resources that I can connect you with later if you want to follow up.
That'd be fantastic. And if you wanted to submit as well some of the regulatory framework that would need to be adjusted in writing, that'd be fantastic for our study. What are the key safety and efficacy considerations when using drones for pesticide application?
The main things are drift, drift and evenness of distribution. Right, it uses a different the mechanisms by which drones use is they blow the spray down, which doesn't exist in other types of platforms, and it was just uncertain how the drift impact would be on that. But again, there's lots of research out there that proves that it's safe. We just have to be able to recognize that research.
Back to you again. What role should technology developers such as Precision AI play in forming regulatory decisions?
Well, again, we've got lots of data and we've got lots of science. If we could submit our science and our data and have it recognized, because we can't do that testing in Canada, we can do that testing in the U.S. But if we could submit our testing in the U.S. to Canada and get that approved, I think that would be fantastic, and we'd be happy to do so.
Yep. Emma, MP Harrison, we can't hear you.
I'm not even new to this, but I still can't unmute myself sometimes. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Go ahead.
Sorry, to Mr. Anderson, to what extent do the PMRA and the U.S. equivalent differ in how they considered your pest control products and technology?
There was no real difference in the regulatory assessment, other than Canada has a requirement for value data to be submitted alongside a registration, so effectively proof that it works. The U.S. requires the registrant to have that data, but not for the data to be submitted.
Thank you. Do you think Canada should permit I think I already know the answer to this, but do you think Canada should permit agricultural producers to use drones to dispense pesticides labeled for aerial use?
I mean, bluntly, I think in some cases they already are. The reality is when a regulatory system doesn't move properly, it's an issue. And I think that with the right science showing that the products can be used safely, then I think that that's a practice that can be encouraged because it can dramatically reduce the use of some of these products and reduce any off-target effects and that type of thing.
Thank you, MP. To Mr. Perron for 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Anderson, in your opening remarks, you talked about organic products that and authorizing phytosanitary organic products. We understand that we need more regulation to inspect them more. Would it not be normal then for the delays to be a little bit longer or the timelines for approval to be longer?
So this is an area where I actually think there's an opportunity, again, for Canada to lead. So when I talked about bio-based products, I'm talking about bio-based crop protection products that are, say, a plant extract or a bacteria or something like that. And generally, these products are designed to have pretty minimal environmental impact, tend to be quite specific in terms of their control. And so that's actually a really powerful advantage associated with these products and also helps us meet sustainability needs alongside productivity needs. And so as an example of a way to potentially accelerate regulatory pathways, there are opportunities to take products like that have advantageous properties and accelerate those and prioritize those from a regulatory approval point of view. Again, not from not in terms of the data that's required, but around where are they in the queue and in what order are those products assessed.
OK. Et peut-être que ces produits-là aussi.
Those products might be able to be used by other, non-organic farming activities if the advantages are not that great. Could they be used in other types of activities?
Yeah, so actually the products that we're designing that are based on organic or bio-based products are actually used in broadacre crops in the U.S., non-organic applications. The reason is because often we're combining them with, say, a traditional synthetic chemical product that a grower might use, reduces the rate of the synthetic product, gives them the sustainability benefit of the bio-based product, and that can be a huge advantage to driving adoption and is really quite exciting.
Okay. Monsieur Tyler.
Mr. Tyler, you talked about, accountability and acting without impunity or with impunity. Often in the government, there are departments, for example, that act, in ways that everyone is always blaming the other department. I want to move forward, but how do you do that?
Je crois qu'on a besoin.
We need many solutions. There isn't one blanket solution. That is one of the reasons I gave you 6 recommendations. But we do need leadership. And we need action. The clerk said that, or rather the chair said that they would, the president actually said they would take action, but we haven't actually seen that yet.
This ends this portion of our meeting. I want to thank the witnesses for being here. It was actually quite interesting. We learned a lot. I appreciate your time. And if you have anything else to submit, you can pass it to the clerk. Thank you very much. We're going to go into, we're just going to talk a little bit about our schedule. So we have kind of 3 things on our plate right now. We have the spent foul, we have the code of conduct, and we have the regulatory pieces. Next week, we committed to the first one on Monday to the spent foul. And then on the Thursday, we committed to going back to the code of conduct. Now, the code of conduct, we only had 2 meetings that we actually committed to in the motion. Is that correct?
Mention the motion, yes.
And how many meetings? Is this going to be our 3rd meeting or 2nd?
It'll be the 2nd.
The 2nd. Is that going to be enough for us, the 2 meetings? We're good? So by next Thursday, we do the 2nd meeting, we're pretty much done the study. Yes?
Well, how many witnesses will that accommodate that were on the list?
How many do you have on your list now, like that have been submitted? A long list?
Long list, so it can go beyond 2 meetings if that's the wish of the people.
So we have more witnesses than just one more meeting.
Chair?
Yep.
Can we just pause a minute?
You want to pause for 3-4 minutes and maybe have some conversations? Yeah? Is that okay with everyone? Why don't we pause for 3-4 minutes? You guys talk and then we'll reconvene. Yeah? Okay.
on a solution. We've talked amongst each other. Why do I feel that this is like a game show?
For 500 points?
Yeah, for 500 points.
Spin the wheel.
There's a T at the beginning of this word here. No. So we would have one more, on Monday would be the spent foul.
Yeah.
We would have one more in the grocery code, so that would be next Wednesday, right? Or Thursday, sorry, thank you. And then we would leave that open. And then from now, the rest of the meetings until the Remembrance Day break, we would focus on the regulatory red tape.
Maybe 2 additional meetings.
Yeah,
right?
that would be it for witnesses. And then after we get back from the break, we will work on the red tape study. So 2 more meetings for witnesses.
The report.
The report, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Perron, are you okay with that?
Oui, on est tous d'accord.
Yes, we all agree. But I think if we it's not 2, but 3 more meetings. We have 5 more meetings before November's break. The target that we set.
Monday, Thursday, Monday, Thursday.
Yeah, so 4 more meetings.
Cette semaine, ah oui, parce que cette semaine.
And this week, right? Oh no, right. This week is already over. So here's the goal. Let's finish listening to all the witnesses before the November break, which would give us that week. Give the analysts that week, who won't really have much of a break, to write a draft report. And then when we come back, we could look at the draft report. And the point would be to pass it before Christmas.
So we would have to schedule it maybe 15 minutes at the end of those meetings? Yeah, at least 15 minutes? So do you think you can work within that framework? So 4 meetings and we do the instructions so we get everything done by the Remembrance Day break?
Yeah, we can have a report, a draft report ready for you on the 17th when we come back from break. Yeah.
So we're all good? You're good? Yeah.
Oui, et donc entièrement d'accord.
I completely agree. If ever there are witnesses who cannot appear, because we do have only 2 meetings with witnesses, I would invite them to provide in writing their solutions, because we do know the problems, but if they do have proper solutions to provide us, we can tell them that we only have 2 meetings left. We were unable to have you appear, but the committee, if everybody else agrees, asks you to submit your solutions with regards to reducing red tape.
Okay, and everyone agrees with that? Okay. That's perfect. Do you have everything you need?
Yeah.
Is it possible to just get that document saying what our next 4 meetings will look like and just send it out to the members? Okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Okay. Thank you.
you.